Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer, board, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my D&D 2024 player class series. With this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the Paladin class from the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook, including class breakdown, differences between the 2014 version, my top 5 species and backgrounds, on my personal subclass rankings, and if you stick around to the end, we're going to build a brand new Paladin character using the 2024 rules via the Roll20 character monster. If you enjoy these D&D videos and want to support my channel, please check out patreon.com/Rogue Watson. The Paladin, one of the strongest classes, I think, and most people think, from the 2014 version. Still very strong, but definitely got some adjustments, I would say, in the 2024 version. The Paladin is a average complexity. Sure, I guess they still have an interesting combination of martial and spell casting. I feel like all of those should be maybe higher, but Paladin and Ranger both are listed as average, and they require multiple stats, which I would also think would be high. So I'm not sure. The complexity thing, I don't know. The primary abilities are Strength and Charisma. You're primarily going to be a martial melee warrior, so you definitely want to have a higher strength, and then all of your Paladin spellcasting and a few of your class abilities are going to proc from Charisma, so it's another class where we really care about multiple stats. Very much a hybrid class here. And then we should play Paladin if we like defense. That's probably the first one that I really disagree with. I don't know if the Paladin, there's not really like a tank specific, which is weird because you think about D&D, that's like, oh, that's where the Holy Trinity came from of like tank, DPS, and support. But there isn't really like a taunting mechanic in D&D, maybe like the compelled duel spell, I guess. So I don't know if somebody wants to, and being like a tank, like the meta knowledge of combat is always just dealing as much damage as possible, which if you're a tank, you're focusing on like absorbing damage versus taking damage, which again is not something that is really a actual strategy in D&D. Now you can take defensive abilities, but I don't think the Paladin necessarily has any more defensive abilities than a fighter, for example, when it comes to fighting styles. The one thing the Paladin does have is the Aura of Protection, which is a huge ability. Doesn't come online to level 6, but that's the only reason I could see that maybe you like defense. It just helps all your allies with saving throws. But honestly, the Paladin kind of is up there with the Rogue in terms of like single target damage, although that did get nerfed a little bit as we transition to talking about the Divine Smite here in a second. So the Paladin's core abilities, obviously just said Strength and Charisma, D10 hit dice, so you're up there with some of the best martials in terms of fighter and ranger of being able to take some hits. Saving throw proficiencies, wisdom and charisma. Wisdom is good, charisma not so much. Skill proficiencies fine. Athletics we're going to be probably good at, and we should honestly we could be a face too if we don't have like a bard or somebody. So persuasion, intimidation, those are all really good to have skill proficiencies in as well. Weapon proficiencies and armor proficiencies include everything. So it's not just fighters that get to do everything. Paladins get to have all the stuff too, which means our starting equipment is very, very good. Or we can choose 150 gold, which is up there with some of the most amount of money a character can possibly start with. So the Paladin already has all of the good things that a fighter has, right? In some ways, a Paladin is kind of a better fighter, honestly. But the Paladin is a partial spellcaster, a half spellcaster. Doesn't quite come online, I think, until level 2. Or no, sorry, you get it at level 1, my bad. Starting at level 1, you get level 1 slots. You don't quite get as many, obviously, spellcasting abilities as a pure spellcaster, like a wizard or a sorcerer or a druid. You only get up to level 5 spellcasting, and that's not to level 17. But you do have spell slots, and they are back on a long rest. They charge off of your charisma. And we'll get to Divine Smite in just a second. Lay on Hands is the same, except it now takes a bonus action instead of an action. So it becomes way more usable in combat. You still have to be able to touch the creature, so it's basically Healing Word, except without the ranged benefit. But having it take a bonus action is way, way better. So Lay on Hands says you have a pool of 5 hit points per paladin level that you can expend as much as you want. You can expend 1 hit point just to give somebody from 0 to 1 hit point if you need to, or you can expend all of your hit points to really heal somebody up, and it can be yourself. You can always touch yourself. Bing. But now it's a bonus action, which is way, way better. Before it was a full action, so you'd really have to dedicate your entire turn to healing somebody, which means you're probably only healing somebody that's unconscious, or you're doing it after battle. Now you can suddenly use it in battle, although Paladins, interestingly enough, are one of the classes that really has to fight for what they're doing with their bonus action every single turn, because you really do have a bonus action every turn, which again is why I feel like the class should probably be higher complexity. You can no longer cure disease with your lay on hands, by the way. I don't know if disease is still a thing in 2024 D&D, frankly. I haven't seen a lot of things that reference disease, so I guess I'm holding off on whether that's a big nerf or anything, but you still have the ability to remove the poison condition by spending 5 hit points, which is pretty good because poison is a bad debuff that gives you disadvantage on everything you do. So we already talked about spellcasting recharges on a long rest. You've got a couple prepared spells, and your spell slots are above, which honestly are still pretty solid, I think. But long rest, still, you have to manage them. You do get weapon mastery also, which is the same as a lot of melee martial folks, right? You do get some form of weapon mastery. The only difference is a fighter gets more weapon masteries as they level up, and the paladin does not. The paladin only ever gets the 2 kinds of weapon masteries. However, as is true of all the other weapon mastery classes, when you finish a long rest, you can change the weapons. So depending on how often you long rest in your campaign, it kind of feels like you already have access to a lot of weapon mastery. So I feel like this, again, and I've talked about this with a fighter, it kind of really nerfs the fighter's ability to have multiple weapon masteries. The fact that people can they're not married to their choice. You can just change it on a long rest, which the main reason you want to change is probably because you get a nice new magic item that you didn't have that weapon mastery before, and then just wait until your next long rest. Now suddenly you've unlocked that weapon mastery and get that extra little benefit from that weapon. Paladins also have access to the fighting style, very much similar to a fighter. However, a new thing in the 2024 options, instead of just automatically getting a fighting style, you can instead choose to take cantrips. This is similar to, I think it was the cleric, where you could choose to either take like heavy armor proficiency or additional cantrips and spell abilities. In this case, you don't actually even lose any of the things that you've got. You do have to give up your fighting style to get cantrips. Normally, the paladin does not have any access to cantrips whatsoever unless you take certain species in the new book. So that's really interesting because range damage is something you may be lacking as a paladin. You're probably not going to have great dex, so you're probably limited to throwing weapons with using your strength. And thrown weapons usually have pretty limited range, usually between 20 and 30 without throwing with disadvantage. So technically, if you've got yourself with a battlefield that's like 100 feet across, your archers and your spellcasters are doing just fine with their like 120, whatever, 300 feet range things. Your paladin's like, well, crap, I just need to be able to get up closer to them. That is one of the only weaknesses you have as a paladin. So you could forego a fighting style, which I do like the fighting styles. You could forego that to take some extra cantrips, and I even recommend Sacred Flame as one of them because that's like the standard ranged cantrip. You do have to choose from the cleric cantrip, which I think Sacred Flame, and there is some more that when we went over the cleric video, there were some good range damage cantrips you could take. So pretty interesting choice right there that could shore up a potential weakness for the paladin if you're willing to give up a fighting style, which I do like fighting styles. All right, level 2, the Smite. The Smite is probably the biggest change that has happened to the paladin. So no longer do you just be able to smite with, you know what, I'm going to look up my old, I wrote down with my notes, and then I'm going to check real quick to make sure I get this correct. The original Divine Smite, you expended a spell slot, any spell slot, to deal radiant damage to the target whenever you attacked. And the extra damage was 2d8 for a first level spell slot. It would scale by 1d8 for every slot after that. And also, if the enemy target was a fiend or an undead, they would take an additional 1d8. So instead of just expending spell slots to do Divine Smites, now the Divine Smite itself is actually a spell, which you don't get until level 2, interestingly enough. What that means is it's a bonus action to use Divine Smite. So that's probably the single biggest change that has happened. No longer is it just a free thing that you're doing every time you attack, free being it still costs you a spell slot. Now it is a bonus action, which means you can only do it once per turn, and suddenly it's competing with all the other bonus action stuff that you have. Also, it's a spell, right? And you can only cast one leveled spell per turn, so you can't use bonus action in addition to you can't take your action to then cast like a leveled spell. So all of that is a pretty big nerf for the paladin, but Similar to how I felt about the Druid Wild Shape nerf, I honestly am totally okay with this. Again, I'm obviously coming from mostly as a DM standpoint. The Paladin is still a fantastically powerful, amazing class, even after this nerf. So I think that means that this is a very necessary nerf. Necessary nerf. The damage is still the same. Target takes 2d8 radiant damage with an additional 1d8 per spell slot that you use, and also it does increase if the target is fiend or undead. As a consolation prize to this nerf, you can cast Divine Smite once per day without spending a spell slot, which I believe means you could expend it at the highest level spell slot you have, right? Because I don't think it says you have to use a first level spell slot. So for example, if you were a 9th level Paladin, you could cast Divine Smite at 3rd level because you're casting the spell without expending a spell slot. So that gives you a pretty damn powerful Divine Smite once per day, which I think is a nice consolation prize. It's still a bonus action when you take after immediately hitting the target with a melee weapon or unarmed strike. So that part of it works the same. Also, technically as a spell with a verbal component, it would be subject to like the silent spell, for example. You wouldn't be able to Divine Smite while in silence. I guess enemies could technically counterspell it as well, which is interesting. That would be kind of shitty to counterspell a Paladin's Divine Smite, but now that it's an official spell, you can definitely do that. So it gets rid of all those weird oddities about the rule. So definitely a big change to Divine Smite, but I still think it's a really great use of it and allows the Paladin to still stock up on all those useful buffing spells, knowing they can always just use Divine Smite. Because again, it's Divine Smite as a spell that you have prepared, and it mentions early in the spellcasting feature that any spell that they say you have prepared doesn't take up one of your prepared spells. You never have to like automatically prepare Divine Smite as part of your, I can only prepare this many spells. Like you automatically get it at level 2, basically, which is also a pretty obvious choice because otherwise you force basically all Paladins. Again, I believe Ranger gets the same thing with Hunter's Mark as an auto. It's just becomes like a class feature, a class signature spell. So big deal on Divine Smite, one that I'm generally okay with, and the free use I think should not be discounted. By the way, Divine Sense is no longer its own resource that you get at first level that lets you detect certain creatures. Let's see, Celestials, Fiends, and Undeads within 60 feet, Undeads, that you can just sense with your Divine Sense. That used to be its own pool of resources that you could expend to use it, and you got it at level 1. Now you have to wait till level 3 when you get your Channel Divinity, which normally your Channel Divinity was only fueled by your subclasses, which you also get at level 3. So now you have a default Channel Divinity, which is your Divine Sense. So your Channel Divinity, by the way, same with a Cleric. Instead of just getting it back on a short rest, you now have more uses, 2 uses, I believe, and you get 1 back on a short rest and then all back on a long rest, and then you get an additional use when you reach Paladin level 11. So I believe that works exact same as the Cleric. Well, technically that's just a buff to Channel Divinity because you still get the use back on a short rest, but now you have an additional use that if you needed to use that between, you just can't short rest soon enough before you have to use it again. But Divine Sense is still pretty limited, I think, but one interesting buff, it's now a bonus action instead of an action. I don't know if that makes a big difference other than the fact that you can now maybe more use it in combat versus out of combat. I think most people use it out of combat, but obviously because it was an action though too. But now it no longer says that it doesn't see them through total cover, I believe was an issue with the original Divine Sense. What does it say? I've got my old book. Location of anyone, know the type. At the end of your next turn, open your awareness up. You detect the presence, consecrate. I thought it said something about total cover in there. Yeah, not behind total cover. So you know the presence means celestial fiend under than 60 feet that is not behind total cover. So, in other words, if they were through a door or something, you wouldn't be able to detect that at all, which is pretty limiting. You basically have to just use it for when you walked into a big room, and then like, all right, well, in case somebody's hiding, I can activate this feature. Well, it no longer says that now, right? For the next 10 minutes, you know the location of any creature of those types within 60 feet, and you know its creature type. You detect the presence of any placed object that's been consecrated or desecrated with a hollow spell. So no longer total cover. So now it kind of works like, infrared supervision, basically, was what it sounds like, where you can detect things like even in other rooms within 60 feet. So suddenly that's a much better feature, which it probably should be because your channel divinity for your subclass ability is always going to be better than this. And you have very limited uses, right? You have like 2 uses total until level 11, and you only get 1 back on a short rest. So if you're using it for this feature, you can't use it for your special, better feature as a subclass. So I appreciate that. I think this did get buffed, but it's very subtly buffed. Again, before that total cover thing prevented you from really using it in any other circumstance except just a large room where maybe things are hiding, in partial cover, basically. You could just make a perception check really to see those, versus this allows you to actually detect them in other rooms that you haven't like activated yet, which is way better and way cooler, I think. So interesting use of, but it's also balanced because again it costs a challenge divinity now. So Paladin honestly got a lot of changes. So subclass at level 3. Interesting bit about Paladin that it goes into, which is kind of a unique class in that there's no longer any like alignment requirements or things that were in past editions of D&D, but it does have an interesting kind of RP aspect where the Paladin player should be dedicated to their oaths, which I think the oath is technically with your subclass and not with just being a basic Paladin, which is interesting. The Paladin's kind of like your knight character, your more noble knight warrior, or somebody who's got a certain virtue, versus the fighter. It could just be kind of a regular mercenary bandit, whatever. And you don't really take those oaths except when you take your subclass, and then you have specific oaths that you take. I think it was Pillars of Eternity, maybe 2, that did something interesting where like you had certain dialogue options you were motivated to take because you would get like bonuses if you followed your path, basically, versus you could break your oath, and then maybe there's a whole oath breaker thing in the DMG. I'm not aware of that yet, but I thought that was an interesting aside that Paladins kind of have this extra little feature that maybe I wouldn't do it necessarily super mechanically because other classes don't have that requirement necessarily where they like have to act a certain way or something, but just something to keep in mind from a role-playing standpoint. I think it does say that if they unrepentantly violate their oath, your Paladin should probably take a more appropriate subclass or abandon the class and adopt another one. Like maybe that could be interesting from a storytelling standpoint for sure, but I wouldn't impose that too strictly as a DM, just because that's, I don't know, it's a weird thing that I mean, if it was a more like strictly mechanical thing, it's like, oh, the Paladin is like straight up better because it has to follow these tenets, then maybe, but otherwise I think it's more of an RP thing. Level 4 ASI, level 5 you get extra attack. We're definitely martial. Level 5 also we get an extra Find Steed spell, which has now been switched to a specific Paladin spell, Paladin only spell. That's level 2. I believe we get 1 free casting of it, similar to Divine Smite. Yep, we do get 1 free casting. Where we can summon a otherworldly steed, which is its own special stat block here. By the way, it does not gain a flying speed unless you use it at level 4+, and we start off at level 2. So level 4+ is not till like tier 4, by the way. So unfortunately, Chris, who very famously summoned a Pegasus by taking like, I think the feat that gives you like a single cleric spell and took like, Find Steed and did all these other things, like that's no longer possible. In fact, this is no longer a cleric spell. It's specifically a paladin spell that basically only paladins can summon, but you can summon a 60-foot like celestial, mount that does scale in terms of its hit points, armor class, and its weapon attack. So pretty nice feature that probably wouldn't honestly be used that much, except for the fact that we do get 1 free casting of it per day. I think that's what makes it a lot cooler. And the fact that it's otherworldly, like you can flavor it as anything, right? It doesn't have to be a fucking horse. It can be a spider or I don't know, a rhinoceros or just whatever, as long as it just uses that same stat block, which is why I like those kind of generic stat blocks that players can reflavor. Level 6 is probably your single most distinctive ability. It's a shame it takes to level 6 to get it, but this is a 10-foot aura that originates from the Paladin player. It's on all the time. It doesn't require any actions or resources or anything. It's always on unless you're incapacitated. And it grants a bonus to all saving throws to your allies in that aura, including you, equal to your charisma modifier. So more so even than spell casting, this is why you want a good charisma modifier. In fact, a lot of the Paladin spells are more buffs and like supportive, so they don't really care about what your charisma modifier is necessarily to be able to cast those spells. However, your aura protection does scale off your charisma bonus, and suddenly getting everybody that plus to saves is very, very good. Now, the weakness, of course, is they have to be right next to you, and obviously having players grouped up right next to each other then makes them more susceptible to having enemy AoEs, which are going to trigger those saves. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation there, where it's possible enemies don't want to be near you, so they don't absorb all those AoE attacks. But if they want those bonuses, there you go. So very good feature, and a lot of your later features and the subclass features actually scale off Aura of Protection because it's just a built-in base feature that all Paladins have. Level 9 is completely, well, not completely new. It's actually borrowing one of the channel divinities from the Oath of Vengeance and putting it into the baseline Paladin feature. So now all Paladins at level 9 basically get what used to be one of the channel divinity options for the Oath of Vengeance, the 2014 version, which is you can expend your channel divinity. It finally gives you a second use of channel divinity. Actually, it's technically a third use because your second use comes from your subclass. That allows you to target a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier, again, scaling up for charisma. You force them to make a wisdom save or become frightened of you for 1 minute or until you take damage, and then they can only take either an action or a bonus action. So nice little kind of AoE debuff. I believe, oh, it is an action though. That is a bummer. Everything else is a bonus action. That's funny that one still takes an action. So a little bit limiting, but if you're fighting a horde of dudes, pretty useful because Frightened's a great debuff to impose on enemies. Level 10 is the first upgrade to your Aura of Protection, which means everybody has immunity to the Frightened condition. Very, very useful. And in fact, if a Frightened ally enters the Aura, the condition has no effect on that ally while there. Pretty awesome, but again, you've only got 10 feet around you. Level 11 is just a straight up upgrade to your melee attacks. Whenever you hit attack using a melee weapon or on a strike, target takes 1d8 radiant damage. By the way, the reason you want to go strength, you could technically go dex because there are some weapons that use dexterity, the finesse weapons, but everything is still, all your divine smites, all your strikes, everything is off of melee weapon attacks, so you really don't want to be a ranged paladin. I don't think that build is going to be very, just be a ranger if you want to do the martial attacker build. If you want to do the melee, or sorry, the martial caster build, if you want to do a ranged version of that, be a ranger. If you want to do a melee version of that, be the paladin. So that's why I definitely recommend strength completely over dexterity for the paladin. Level 14 is the restoring touch. This is a upgrade to Lay on Hands, which allows you to expend 5 points to remove any of the conditions that would basically be part of Lesser Restoration, maybe a little bit better than that. Blind, Charmed, Deafened, Frightened, Paralyzed, or Stunned. Those are really, really nasty debuffs that would absolutely be worth using Lay on Hands. I remember Lay on Hands is now a bonus action, so before it really sucked to use your entire action just to free somebody else from a debuff. Now it is only a bonus action, which is way, way better. The 2014 version, by the way, was to end a spell effect on a player character. So this is interesting, where I don't know if it's a buff or a nerf, or just maybe ends up going off a little better, because a lot of enemies have the ability to give these conditions not through spells, like just on their basic attacks or something. They have a chance to, like a Mind Flayer's Mind Blast could stun, for example, or maybe other creatures can frighten. So I think that's very useful, but also spells could also have different uses too that would be nicer to end. So it's an interesting change from the 2014 version, but also a little bit better to adjudicate as the DM and player, because these are very specific conditions. You just spend 5 points to heal those. So very nice. Level 18 is the same, which our protection now extends to 30 feet. Way, way better, but it's a shame we have to wait to level 18 to get that. Level 19 is our Epic Boon. Level 20, uniquely to the Paladin class, this was same in the 2014 version, although maybe another class does this, where your top capstone ability is actually tied to your spell, your subclass. So Paladin spells, we already went over Divine Smite is a big difference. I think the smites in general have been changed slightly from their initial original version, in that now they can be upcast for higher level spell slots, so they scale better. They're still bonus actions, I believe. I think they were still bonus actions in the old one. But now you can do it they're no longer concentration, where you have to okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to hope I hit somebody with it. I'm going to concentrate on the spell, and it goes off when I hit. It was all very awkwardly timed with those smites. Instead, now all the smites basically work like Divine Smite would, which makes sense. So now you don't have to juggle all that. So instead, all of these other smites, there's Thunderous Smite, Wrathful Smite, Searing Smite, I think there's 3 or 4 of them, and then more maybe come online later on. in higher levels. They all have slightly different effects that usually balance the fact that you're doing slightly less damage than you would with a Divine Smite, but they have maybe some other effect. For example, Thunderous Smite can push targets away. Wrathful Smite, I believe, can target them with a frightening effect right then and maybe grant like disadvantage or something. So all of them give you kind of extra benefits and cool things that you can do. They still take a spell slot. They still take a bonus action, but it's no longer this kind of weirdly awkward timed concentration thing. Instead, it just goes off, right then when you attack, same as Divine Smite. So sort of a buff, but more of just like a rules streamlining clarification thing to all. Well, I guess there is a buff because before I don't think they scaled for damage. I think only weirdly like one of them scaled for damage in the 2014 version. Now they all basically scale up for damage, just like a Divine Smite would. So that's the main thing I want to talk about. In fact, I think it's the only thing I want to talk about when it came to the Paladin spells in general. Yeah, Shining Smite, and then Shining Smite might be a new one. It sounds a lot like Divine Smite, but it does slightly less damage. But then it actually gives attack rolls. Let's see if I can find Shining. Where's that one? Shining. Oh, maybe Shining Smite's level 2. Yeah, that's the difference. Okay. So you don't actually get the Shining Smite to level 2 spell slots. It does do less damage, which at that point, a Divine Smite would do 3d8 damage. This one only does 2d6 damage. But attack rolls against the target have advantage. And this one actually does take concentration like the others. So while you're concentrating on it, you're forcing them to have you're giving your allies as well advantage. So kind of a fairy fire, like a single target fairy fire. Paladin's very good against single targets, by the way, because of all these powerful smites they can unleash. So pretty good spells. All right, let's go over subclasses. It's subclass time. Starting with the Oath of Devotion. This one is from obviously the original Player's Handbook from 2014, and this is kind of the default. I just want to be a paladin and be slightly more paladin-y. Your tenets are just, you're a noble, honorable paladin, which is so kind of classic knight build. Your spells, protection from evil and good, shield of faith. A lot of these are already paladin or cleric spells, but you automatically get them prepared, so it allows you to take other spells, but they're fine for the most part. Nothing too exciting, I think. Your Channel Divinity feature is still the exact same as 2014, except now it lasts for 10 minutes instead of 1 minute. So this is, you can expend your Channel Divinity to give yourself a bonus to attack rolls equal to your Charisma modifier, which is probably between like +2 and +4. And then you can choose to do radiant damage or normal damage. Your weapon emits light as well. Slightly better attack is probably the most boring thing you can do with your Channel Divinity, but also still very useful for somebody who's attacking a lot and wants to be able to hit and unleash all of their abilities, so I can see why that's useful. The big buff here, again, is before it lasted for 1 minute, which is exactly like a combat. Now 10 minutes, not that big of a deal, but maybe if you finish up a combat encounter and your party kind of hurries over to the next one and opens the door and triggers another group of enemies, you might still have this one online for 10 minutes. So that's how I would roll as a DM anyway. So technically a buff on that one. Level 7, now immunity to Charmed condition, while in the Aura, which we already got immunity to Frighten in level 10, or we will get at level 10. So Charmed, probably less used than Frighten, but still can shut down a lot of bad spells and abilities, namely something like Hypnotic Pattern for level 7. Level 15, Smite of Protection. Whenever you cast Divine Smite, your allies have half cover while in your Aura of Protection. This is a nerf, because the other 2014 version for Aura of Protection bonus, I believe, gave us protection. Yes, it's a huge nerf. So beginning at 15th level, you are always under the effects of protection from evil and good spell. That's a first level spell that gives disadvantage for enemies of most types of enemies. Basically everything that's not like humanoid or like beast or something. Would have disadvantage on attacking you, and so all of your allies with that aura. That was humongous. Now, first, it only triggers when you cast Divine Smite, which is a spell that you're using spell slots for most of the time, so it's not on all the time, and only you and your allies have half cover, which is +2 to AC and saving throws. So that is a massive nerf for that feature that's barely going to care or remember about that feature. I mean, I guess it's just an added thing for Divine Smite. Also, level 15, like, come on, I expect better at that level. Level 20 is still pretty good, I guess. Everybody gets kind of, basically all the Paladins get some kind of super mode they can turn on. So this one is a bonus action. Your Aura of Protection now gives advantage on saving throws. versus fiends and undeads. I believe you auto deal damage. Enemy starts his turn in the aura. Creature takes radiant damage equal to charisma plus proficiency bonus. I guess technically that just means it scales better. Before it was like a flat 10 damage, and now it's bright light that is sunlight. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, here's the thing. The Paladin subclasses, for the most part, aren't super exciting, but I think the base kit for the Paladin is so damn good that it isn't as bad. that maybe they're not that exciting. The Oath of Glory is from Mythic Odysseys of Theros, which is one of the only like 24, or not 2014, but the base 5e version books that I never actually reviewed, so I'm not as familiar with this subclass. This one is kind of based on like the classic, mythological heroes, your Herculeses, your Perseuses, and their tenets are inspire others to strive for glory, known for your deeds. Like basically kind of being like a showboating celebrity, but still in a monster hunting kind of a way. You actually have two uses of Channel Divinity, interestingly enough. One of them is you can give you a bonus action, give yourself advantage on athletics and acrobatics checks, and increase the distance of your jumps. That's fine, although you're probably already going to have pretty good athletics checks, I would imagine. It's kind of a boring use of your Channel Divinity, frankly. A more interesting use, but only is triggered after you cast Divine Smite. You can expend Channel Divinity to give out temporary hit points to allies within 30 feet of yourself, including yourself, in equal to 2d8 plus your Paladin level. It's not a whole lot, but temporary hit points are very nice. And it only triggers off of, you're just not going to be able to use it that often, unfortunately. You have to do Divine Smite and have the Channel Divinity ready, but I don't know, temporary hit points are fine. Your spells are Guiding Bolt, which is actually a range damage spell, which is pretty nice to have. Magic Weapon increases your attacks. Haste, the fact that you could haste yourself at level 9 is pretty interesting. So this one actually gives you some like wizardy abilities as well, which is pretty nice. Interesting spell list for that one. Level 7, your speed increases by 10 feet. What are we, a monk or barbarian? In addition, when an ally enters your aura of protection or starts its turn there, the ally's speed increases by 10 feet. I think that's pretty limiting, although we did talk about how paladins do have some ranged issues, so closing in with the enemy could be useful. Level 15 feature, though, I do like quite a bit. You can use a reaction to increase your AC or a target's AC if they're within 10 feet of you, basically within your aura, equal to your charisma modifier, which again should be between 2 and 4, so that could make a difference between an attack. The cooler thing, though, is if that then causes the attack to miss, you get to make a free weapon attack as part of that reaction, which is a pretty cool benefit. You can only use that total feature equal to your charisma modifier per long rest, and it is your reaction to do that. But I think that's a pretty cool ability right there. Living Legend at level 20 is a bonus action. You do a super mode for 10 minutes. You advantage on charisma checks. If you fail a saving throw, you can take a reaction to re-roll it. That's pretty nice. And when you make an attack roll with a weapon and miss, you can just cause that attack to hit instead. Only once per turn. It's almost like you don't have to roll attack rolls anymore. That's fine, but again, level 20, like, come on, man. We're gods by now. We should be amazing. Advantage on charisma checks. I should not even fail charisma checks ever again. Oath of the Ancients is one that I always thought was pretty interesting from the player's handbook. This is kind of the like druid multiclass, or soft multiclass. You're devoted to like nature and like just life in general. You delight in art and laughter. It's just not what you think of as a paladin, I guess. Kind of maybe an artsy fartsy type. Level 3, your Channel Divinity allows you to do kind of an AoE restrain, which is different from the 2014 version, which was a single target restrain ability. This one is an AoE. I'm trying to think if it's per charisma. No, I don't think it's not. Each creature of your choice you can see within 15 feet. All right, so slightly, it's not. Basically, it's the entangle spell, right? It's a strength saving throw where they have the restrain condition, and restrain means they have disadvantage on all their stuff, and you all have advantage on them. So very, very good. And it's each creature of your choice. So even if you've got allies in there, there's no friendly fire there. You can only hit the enemy creatures. So very useful. It is an action, a full action to do it. So that's kind of a bummer. And only 15 feet of yourself. So you can't just choose a ranged area somewhere. It still has to be close to you. But I still think that's a pretty cool feature and very useful, especially if you don't have some kind of good crowd controlling ability amongst your party that can do that kind of a thing. Your spells include, as you imagine, a lot of druidy spells, speak with animals, and snaring strike, which snaring strike's not as good for a paladin because we've already got a lot of good like smites and extra things we can do. But that's like a single target restrain, basically similar to our smites that do a single target effect. Misty Step is amazing for the paladin though. Give me that freaking teleport. Moonbeam is an extra AoE damage. That's not something paladins usually have access to. So I really enjoy the Oath of Ancient spell list too, kind of the, again, druid multiclass. Level 7 is, I think, a bit of a nerf. Yeah, so this one, the previous 2014 version, was that we were resistant to all spell damage from magic spells, I guess. This one, instead, we just have flat resistance to necrotic, psychic, and radiant damage while within the aura of protection. So it upgrades our aura of protection. Radiant damage is not used very much, at least in the 2014 version, against players. Psychic damage just depends heavily on the campaign, but, you know, probably not as much as poison or necrotic or maybe some elements. Necrotic, though, definitely a big one and a great one to get resistance to. Do note that if you want to be an Aasimar, which would be a popular choice, I imagine, for paladins, given they're like the freaking like angel species, they already get a baseline necrotic and radiant damage resistance. So Oath of Ancients, not so safe. Although you don't get to extend that to your allies, so that could still be, and maybe that's a good way of extending it to your allies too, with the aura of warding. But always good to get resistance in general, but definitely feels like a nerf from the 2014 version. Level 15, it basically gives you a better version of the Orc's Relentless Endurance. So when you're reduced to 0 hit points and not killed outright, which is like basically not hitting that negative number, you can drop to 1 hit point instead, which is the same as Relentless Endurance, once per long rest. However, look at the second part of the sentence. You regain a number of hit points equal to 3 times your Paladin level. We get this feature at level 15. So that would be 45 hit points that we get. Holy crap, right? So suddenly the DM thinks they downed you and you say, oh no, I've got Undying Sentinel level 15. I'm going to pop back up with 45 hit points. That's a big freaking deal right there. That's an amazing ability. Granted, only comes online if you hit 0 hit points, which hopefully the Paladin isn't doing too often, and you only get it once per long rest, but that makes a huge deal between suddenly you're down versus you're back up and still can tank quite a few hits. So very, very awesome feature there, and I believe that that second sentence is new for this 2024 version, so that was a huge buff. Level 20, again, you've got your bonus action upgrade mode you can use. This one is for Aura of Protection, and enemies have disadvantage on saving throws against spells. You can just regenerate a flat 10 hit points. Interesting that that one they kept as a flat number and didn't have that scale with, like, you know, charisma or proficiency bonus or something. And then when you cast a spell, there's a casting time of an action. You can cast it using a bonus action instead. So this one really makes you want to be more of a caster by the time you're level 20. Even though Paladin is not really that at all, you do have some more kind of castery type spells, like a Moonbeam or an Ice Storm or something that takes a full action. But like, I feel like a lot of the spells you're casting as a Paladin to be an effective Paladin is bonus action. So I just feel like this is kind of a weird and disadvantage on saving throws against your spells. It's like it wants you to be more of a damaging spellcaster all of a sudden at level 20, even though I don't necessarily think your spell list supports that. So interesting level 20 feature that kind of made me get a little bit confused on. This is me looking up Entangle to see how that compared to the Paladin version. I guess the Paladin version doesn't turn into difficult terrain either. And then finally, we've got the Oath of Vengeance. This is probably the most popular Paladin because it's such a cool, badass idea. You're basically like a Batman, you know, type character where your whole oath is just to fight injustice and show the wicked no mercy, aid those harmed by injustice. I mean, you're a classic, like, just brooding vigilante superhero, which is a really cool version and concept for a Paladin. I mean, look at this friggin' artwork. Honestly, all the Paladin artwork has been pretty good. I really want to point out the Oath of Devotion. I had some really great artwork too, with the kind of older lady with some amazing like makeup and earrings, and like the armor set, the giant like shield and spear. Looks, I like her whole getup. It's fucking awesome. Oath of Vengeance, still just as good as it was in 2014. You've got the Vow of Enmity, which again, the other one, the other, whatever it was called, Vow or Abjure or something, was moved to the baseline kit of all Paladins at level 9. So, but level 3, you still get the Vow of Enmity, where you can use the Channel Divinity as part of your attack action to basically target a single enemy and give yourself advantage on attack rolls against that creature for 1 minute. However, and I believe this one might be new. Yes, it is. they basically got the Hunter's Mark feature. So if the creature drops to 0 hit points before the vow ends, which is 1 minute, you can transfer the vow to a different creature within 30 feet, requiring no action. So before, you'd only want to use it against really powerful enemies because, you know, that's your whole channel divinity. So you're like, well, I just want to use it against this creature. When it's dead, then I no longer have, you know, advantage on any other creatures. But now you could use it maybe in a group of enemies or in more cases where, you know, your party's going to short rest pretty soon, I guess, because you can just revow people as you go along. And I mean, having advantage on attack rolls is, first of all, freaking humongous anyway. And second of all, it will get upgraded as we get a little bit higher level. So Relentless Avenger says that whenever you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, you can reduce the creature's speed to 0 until the end of the current turn. You can also move up to half your speed as part of a reaction as a provoke opportunity attacks. This is different than the original version, which just says when you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, you can move up to half your speed after the attack as part of the same reaction. It doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. It lets you basically chase people. Now you don't have to chase people at all. You can just reduce the speed to 0. So in other words, when you're hitting a creature with an opportunity attack, it's because they're leaving your reach, right? They're trying to get out of you and go after somebody else or run away. Now you can just hit a creature, and if you do hit them, you reduce their speed to 0. They're not going anywhere. So you don't really have to move as part of the same reaction, but I guess it's a nice feature. But that's a huge buff, I think, for the Oath of Vengeance. You can just make them not be able to retreat from you. It also makes them taking the disengage action a lot more useful. This may pair with that one. You just still get that one feat. I didn't actually look up that combo anymore, where you can also attack them with an opportunity attack even if they disengage. I don't know if that's still... I didn't look that one up in the new 2024 book, but somebody in the comments maybe will talk about how that if the Sentinel still exists or if it's Polar Master, I forget which one of those, that could combo off that very, very well. Level 15, Soul of Vengeance. Immediately after a creature under the effects of your Vow of Enmity hits or misses with an attack roll, so just they do an attack against you, you can take a reaction to attack them. Pretty nice, but note that it does take a reaction to do an opportunity attack, so technically doesn't synergize with Relentless Avenger. So we have two uses of our basically reaction that we need to be careful of which one we want to use, but pretty nice to be able to just use an attack. In other words, if somebody's never going to try to run away from us and they're just attacking us the whole time, then Soul of Vengeance is going to be a better use. And then level 20, Avenging Angel is a bonus action. We get probably the coolest feature of all of them. For 10 minutes, we just gain a flying speed of 60 feet by sprouting wings on our back, including hovering, and Aura Protection now becomes a frightening aura, in addition to our aura, I guess, that gives the frightened condition on a wisdom save. By the way, the spells includes Hunter's Mark, which is the ranger signature freaking spell that allows you to put it on a target, move it around, and deal extra damage to somebody. Misty Step, just as good, and Oath of Ancients, Hold Persons, and Haste are great spell. Like, you just get absolutely amazing spells. I mentioned Door Banishment, Hold Monster, like, holy shit, as the Oath of Vengeance. All right, so my rankings for subclasses, and note, again, the Paladin base kit is still pretty good, and the subclasses are mostly okay. I think Vengeance is still definitely the top, though. I think thematically it's just very cool. All the abilities are pretty awesome. The Vow got a huge buff with being able to move it around, you know, so I think Vengeance has to be on top. For number 2, I think I'm going to go with Ancients. I really like their spell list. I like the entangle you can do with your channel divinity now that it's a proper AoE entangle and you can choose your foes and everything. The resistance is still good. Undying Sentinel, got an amazing buff where you can just pop yourself back up for being down, so that's a huge one there. And then third and fourth is kind of a bit tricky with both of these. Are okay. I don't think they're bad anyway. I'm probably gonna put Glory ultimately at third. Just because I think I like the level 15 feature a lot. The bonus to AC with a free reaction hit, and then giving temporary hit points when you Divine Smite versus Devotion, which does give you the little bit of extra attack, but a little bit of bonus to extra attack, I think is just the least interesting of all the abilities. And then I think they lost a lot of credit for me by the level 15 feature getting hugely nerfed, where it's only half cover when you Divine Smite. It's just not that sexy. So Oath of Devotion is going to be the last one for me at level 4. Backgrounds that Eric forgot to set up. Let's go to backgrounds, character origins, background descriptions. Let's go ahead and get species on there as well. All right, so backgrounds are a little bit trickier for the Paladin because we want strength and we want charisma, right? Because strength is all of our melee attacks and charisma fuels a lot of our, it's our spell casting and then some of our abilities and our aura protection. Saving throw bonus. There are only, as far as I can tell, 2 backgrounds that give you both strength and charisma. One of them is hilariously one of my all-time favorite backgrounds, which is the Entertainer, and the other is Noble. So Entertainer I've mentioned countless times in these guides. Excuse me, but the Musician feat is so freaking good. You basically every short rest give your allies heroic inspiration, which is awesome and kind of feels similar. In fact, you could almost flavor that as just, if you don't want to be like playing an instrument, I would just flavor it as like just telling you, especially like Oath of Glory, like you're just telling people about the good deeds or something and being an orator. Ability scores, again, strength, charisma are the ones you want. Dexterity is a great one to have as well. And then acrobatics and performance are pretty good, especially acrobatics. Usually you're not great at dex for the Paladin. So Entertainer, still very good. I think I would, because of that, rank Entertainer as my number 1 background, because again, it's one of the only ones that gives you both strength and dex, and the Musician feat is absolutely fantastic. Noble is the only one that gives you strength and charisma. Intelligence, we don't really give a shit about, and we're not going to be very good at skills. Except it does interestingly combo with skilled, which gives us 3 new skill proficiencies, which is not really, but again, probably don't have a good intelligence. It's a dump stat for Paladins very easily. So that's not really the thing that I want to be. So it's like the least useful feat to me, but it does give you strength and charisma. And Noble is very thematically tied to Paladins as well. I think I would put Noble at number 3, and I'm going to slide Soldier up to number 2, because Soldier still gives us all of our melee martial abilities, strength, dex, and con, which is going to be good for anybody who's up front in melee. But the important thing is Savage Attacker is a fantastic feat for any melee person, and obviously Paladin is included in that, which lets us basically get advantage on our damage dice that we roll for our weapon attacks. Only once per turn, but still. We're going to be attacking a lot as a Paladin for sure. Not as much as, I guess, a monk or somebody, but still, it's nice to have. Soldier, I think, is very thematically appropriate for Paladins, so I think I'm going to put that one at number 2. So Entertainer at 1, Soldier at 2, Noble at 3. Then it gets a lot tougher because we don't have anybody that really stands out as a great background to me. So I kind of have to rely on some of my like default good backgrounds for melee folks. So Farmer doesn't have charisma, but does have strength and constitution, which are both very good for, melee upfront folks. And then Tough gives us that extra hit points, although I'm not terribly concerned about hit points as a Paladin, but those are all good things to have. So I think I put up Farmer at number 4, and then Wayfarer at number 5, especially if you want to be kind of an interesting, like, hey, I wasn't always a knight or something. I grew up, on the mean streets or something and just wanted to turn my life around and become a Paladin. Criminal, also interesting one for that. But Criminal doesn't really give us any of our good stats that we want. Wayfarer doesn't have strength, which makes me feel real bad about not having strength. And you really don't want to, I don't think, build a dexterity based, unless you want to go like finesse weapons only with a Paladin, which you could, and go melee and have just a better dexterity in general. Maybe use medium armor instead of heavy armor for whatever reason. Or you just, you're okay with having like a 16, unless you're rolling it lucky, you're okay with maybe having a 16 as your highest strength stat, which is not the end of the world. It does give you charisma otherwise, but lucky is great, obviously, just rerolls all the way around. So don't necessarily feel great about that one, but again, thematically it could be very cool. So Entertainer at 1, Soldier 2, Noble 3, Farmer at 4, and Wayfarer coming up at 5. Which brings us to our species. So you're going to think, oh, well, Aasimar is like the most thematically appropriate. That's the one he's going to choose on there. Well, hold on to your horses for a second, because we're still a martial first and foremost, and there are some species that do that better than others. I would very much look at the Orc as my number 1 pick, because range is a weakness for the Paladin. A lot of our stuff is going to be to do with melee weapons, so being able to dash as a bonus action and gain temporary hit points when we do that, and equal number of times equal short rest, which we can do it quite a bit, is fantastic. Now, the bummer is we have a lot of things competing for a bonus action, right? But like being able to dash is an extra 30 feet bonus action. That can be the difference between closing in with somebody and melee that first turn or not. That is pretty enormous. So I love, love, love that ability. I think that's going to come around quite a bit as a Paladin. Plus, Relentless Endurance. Remember, we don't get that sexy version of Relentless Endurance until our level 15, and that's only if we take Oath of Ancients. So if we're not doing any of that, then this becomes very useful and allows you to pop back up from 1 hit point once per long rest, and obviously very superior dark vision. So I would put Orc at my number 1. And then similar to basically all the other melees like fighters and monks, I really like Goliath as a number 2. They just have so many great like synergistic features with martial characters that you can add damage to your attack rolls and do all these other kind of almost weapon mastery type abilities, or even effects of like a smite. You can only do so many, per long rest, but still they all come really cool. And then obviously embiggening yourself, having advantage on strength checks, increasing speed. Again, speed is an issue for paladins, so all of those are good features. I would put Goliath as my number 2. Probably just for baseline all melee folks is Goliath's absolutely amazing. Number 3, I'm thinking Dragonborn. Similar reason for why I like martials, because with that new feature of Dragonborn being able to replace one of your attacks with your AoE breath weapon. The breath weapon got a big buff. Unfortunately, it scales off your Constitution modifier, which Paladins should have a decent con, but you might not have it as good because you have to worry about other stats as well, and you might be relying more on your armor or something. But being able to do AoE damage as part of your attack action, that's another weakness of the Paladin, is you're very much focused on single targets versus AoE. Also, level 5, just having freaking flight, pretty good, since we don't get that unless we're like, what, a level 20 Oath of Vengeance Paladin. So, and resistance to different kinds of elemental resistances, which normally we did not have. We would have resistance to other kind of things depending on other paladins that subclasses we took, but I don't think any of them give you those specific kind of resistances. All right, finally at the 4th one, I will reluctantly and begrudgingly, I guess, recommend the Aasimar. I don't think they actually synergize super well with paladins. I mean, resistant necrotic and radiant is great, but we've got that, I think it was Oath of Ancients that already gave us necrotic and radiant. For healing hands, it's just a worse lay on hands where we have a number of d4s equal to proficiency bonus. That's not a lot. That's 2 or 3 d4s, maybe 44 later on. And it uses an action to do it, and we can only use it once per long rest. So again, our lay on hands is just way better than that. We know the light cantrip. That's fine, I guess. Bonus action transformation is very fun. We get spectral wings. We can fly. We can deal radiant damage and or cause a fright condition. I mean, all that stuff is very fun. I like that thematically. It's pretty nice, and I like that it's, I guess, a bonus action, not a full action. I think it's more just like the theme versus the synergistic skills is why you take the Aasimar in general, but that will give it level 4. And then for maybe an interesting anti-theme, maybe going along with like the criminal or wayfinder background or something, is the Tiefling. I think is an interesting choice for the Paladin, because Tiefling, you can choose your spell casting ability, which we're going to have good charisma, or should have decent charisma, and it gives us free spells and, more importantly, a free damaging cantrip. So if we didn't take the more damaging cantrip option for paladins, in other words, we still want our fighting style and don't want those cleric cantrips, we can instead go with a Tiefling and get access to Poison Spray, Chill Touch, or Firebolt, which are all range damage. I would probably recommend the Firebolt one because that's what gives you the best range, and also Hellish Rebuke as an interesting just once per long rest reaction attack that can do pretty good damage. I think is pretty useful. False Life could be good though for giving you like decent temporary hit points, but they won't probably scale very well in the end. I think resistance to fire damage is going to be great. Firebolt cantrip is great. Hellish Rebuke specifically for the Infernal Tiefling. So number 1 Orc, number 2 Goliath, number 3 Dragonborn, number 4 Aasimar, and number 5 Tiefling is my list as we go into building our 2024 Paladin character. So I think for this character purpose, I'm really just going to go with kind of my best choices. As I was looking at these, I was like, all right, Oath of Vengeance, still really cool. And I'm just kind of basic and like, yeah, I like the kind of Batman type character. But also, it could be like you are the classic, stereotypical, like 1970s, 80s loose cannon cop, right? Like, and I definitely want to be an orc because orc was my number 1, so I want to stick to my guns on that one. And I like the idea of you being like like the Harry Callahan, Clint Eastwood type orc character, maybe like an Axel Foley or something, like some kind of interesting like cop, but he's like a loose cannon who doesn't necessarily, but maybe he's no longer a cop also, because if he's Oath of Vengeance, maybe it is more like Batman where the paladin kind of maybe turned their back on the force and said, you know what? And in fact, that's a great backstory. Like I saw too many bad guys get away with it. They got acquitted. You know, these were powerful mob bosses or whatever, and I had to take matters into my own hands. And that's why I become a paladin, even though it's like very morally questionable. So I think that's a cool concept and cool idea for a paladin character, and that's what we're going to be making. Here we're going to start at level 3 because we know what we're doing, and we are going to choose the Oath of Vengeance from the 2024 Player's Handbook. It looks like we have something that we can maybe choose here, so let's scroll down. So we've got Lay on Hands, level 1, Paladin spellcasting, Weapon Mastery. That's what we're choosing right now, is our Weapon Mastery. I don't actually know. I haven't thought about. We're probably can't use guns or anything here. I mean, we could just use, I guess it depends on our fighting style too, which if we just want to go with a generic, I mean, I'm going very basic, but like a two-hander fighting style. So maybe we'll go great sword, and then you probably want to just have another ranged weapon that you can throw. So probably a javelin. We'll go javelin and great sword for now. That seems like a pretty good mix. So let's go click on next. So species, we're going to go with orc. Scroll down and find orc. And again, I grew up in the city, like became the cop, and then, you know, joined the force and was very much like, you know, maybe had a real chip on his shoulder about fighting back against bad guys. And then they just saw too many bad guys get away with it. And I had to go down a darker and swear an oath of vengeance to still, but, you know, definitely hunt down the bad guys, but doing so in like a protected, very much like a Daredevil I'm picturing also. Excited about that new Daredevil show coming out. I love the Netflix series. So our background, I think the best background we can choose in this case, and one of my favorites, is going to be soldier. Like I think you can flavor soldier as being part of a cop force, right? You're part of some sort of militaristic force. So I think the soldier background would fit it pretty well. Again, I'm looking at my own list. You know, a lot of these times when I make a character, I really have an idea, and then I use just some of them that are my top 5. But this one, I'm really trying to look at the ones that are like near the top of my ranking lists. All right, soldier. One day they will let us filter. There we go. All right, so soldier. Click on that. That gives us our savage attacker feats, and we'll choose our ability stuff. Athletics and intimidation, which is great. All right, fighting style. I think we're just going to go with great weapon fighting for right now, which gives us better two-handed. When you roll damage for an attack made with a melee weapon you're holding with 2 hands, you can treat any 1 or 2 on a damage die as a 3. You know, interesting, with Savage Attacker, it actually is not that synergistic with Savage Attacker, is it? I didn't think about that specific thing. Because Savage Attacker says once per turn, we can re-roll a damage die, or re-roll 2 damage. Is that what it's? Let me make sure I get this description correct on this one. Once per turn, you can roll the weapon's damage dice twice and use either roll against the target. This says whenever you roll damage for an attack made with a weapon holding with 2 hands, you can treat any 1 or a 2 on a damage die as a 3. That's almost better than Savage Attacker. I guess technically you could roll like, you know, a 3 and a 7 for Savage Attacker, and then that's better for that. You would roll better. I don't know. Maybe they're slightly synergistic, but you would hopefully never roll really bad on damage with both of those features. We're still going to select it though. For great weapon fighting, so we've got that one's our fighting style instead of taking the cantrips. All right, so now for stats, we're gonna roll because we roll for all stats because it's fun. We did really crazy well with our monk. We've done really bad in the past for like a fighter. Let's see what we do for. Okay, that's pretty bad. We rolled a 12, a 13, a 13, an 8, a 13, and a 13. My goodness. So nothing higher than a 13 is definitely bad. But also only one thing lower than a 12. So we're going to really rely on our soldier ability scores. And guess what? We can't actually increase our charisma with soldier, only our strength and our con. So that's a big bummer. So let's go ahead and put our highest stats in here. And I'm okay with making probably constitution there. Intelligence will definitely be the lowest. Wisdom should be pretty decent. And then dexterity is not going to be a great character, I'll be honest. So what do we got? Strength and calling language can increase. So strength can become a 14 is going to be our highest ability. We could technically give ourselves a 15 strength, and I guess then at level 4 we would choose something to get us a 16. That is garbage. That's really, really not great. We'd probably do that though. Choose another strength and then increase our constitution, I think, over dex. But yikes, that's not great. That's not great. Not one of the best rolls I've made. It's hard to get excited about a character that doesn't even have a 16 in any stat to start at level 1. What a bummer. Skill proficiencies. We've already got athletics and intimidation, so insight would be great for a cop, obviously. And then probably either persuasion or medicine. Medicine would be like forensics cops. Let's do that one. All right, we have a gaming proficiency, I guess. Let's do dice, sure. Then we've got all our weapons proficiencies. That's what our proficiency bonuses looks like. It's not great because we don't have great stats, unfortunately. We do get to choose some spells, though. Level 1, we can choose a level 1 spell. Level 2, we get to choose a level 1 spell. Level 3, we choose a level 1 spell. And we already start with Divine Smite, Bane, and Hunter's Mark, because those are part of the Vengeance spells. So those are all really good spells that we want to use. I think for Paladin, let's see. I really like Compelled Duel. It's kind of the classic like taunt effect that you can use, and is like is me like taunting them essentially into attacking me and being the tank. So that's a good one for that one. Definitely feel like there should be some smites on here. Thunderous Smite could almost be like blasting them with a gunshot, right? It's like really loud blast and it can knock them down. Yeah, doing thunder damage. Must succeed a strength saving throw or be pushed 10 feet away from you. I have the prone condition. I kind of like that one, I think. Let's go Thunderous Smite. I don't think we need to take a whole lot of smites. And then we don't have anything. Or yeah, there is concentration. Sorry, Hunter's Mark and Compelled Duel's concentration. There's plenty of those. Okay. Command actually doesn't require concentration. Divine Favor is a good one to take. That's the one that gives you an extra D4 on your weapon attacks, but maybe it's not as good when we're only attacking one time. When we're level 5, it becomes really good. Shield of Faith gives us a +2 AC. Detect Evil and Good actually would be a great one. Oh, we get another one, I guess, here. That's definitely like you. Although Detect Evil and Good, I wonder if you need that when you have Divine Sense. I guess you could free up your Divine Sense. Or sorry, your Channel Divinity is what I meant to say. Well, yeah, it's Divine Sense from Channel Divinity. But we'll go ahead and take that. Detect Evil and Good. Oh, we got a lot more spells than I'm thinking. Jeez. How many spells do I get to choose here? All right, well, let's just start choosing them. Command. Definitely like freeze, throw up your hands. How many spells do I get at level 3? I'm actually not even aware. Let's see. Prepared spells at 3rd level is 4. Oh, but it's 4 in addition to the ones I have here, I think. Divine Smite, Bane, and Hunter's Mark. But that's already 4 right here, right? That's a check mark. That's a check mark. I guess I get one more from something else. Level 3 gives me another one. Huh. I've miscalculated, or maybe Roll20's miscalculated. It was probably me. We'll take... I don't know. We'll go ahead and take Divine Favor. That's a good one to grab. We'll want to use Divine Favor at some point. Just I don't see myself using it until I get extra attack necessarily. All right, now it's happy. I guess we get maybe 5 spells, or maybe I selected too many spells. I don't know. Anyway, that's the spell. Yeah, I think I should only take 4. If I delete one of these, does it say I'm okay? Let's see. Let's take out command. No, it still wants me to select another one. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not sure where the other extra spell came from, but we've got 5 spells plus Bane. I mean, that's a lot of spells too. When you get to level 3, you've got quite the spell list there. Equipment choice, we'd probably choose chainmail, shield, longsword. Probably choose the money because we want to make sure we get our own two-handed weapon in that case. We can choose. Oh, interesting, a short bow. Sure, although a short bow would be pretty crappy, I think. All right, character name. What was the? So I think it was Callahan from all the Dirty Harry movies. What was the one from The Simpsons though, where they made fun of it? McGarnagle, I think. Was that it? I don't know how the fuck you spell that. Garnagle. Probably with a capital G. Or maybe I just made that up. McGarnagle. That'd be funny though. Definitely like somebody who grew up on the streets, became a cop, got disillusioned with bad guys getting away, and then swore an oath of vengeance to fight others, even though they apparently don't have the best stats for that. So that is our custom orc paladin character soldier. That hopefully, if I was playing this character, which it does sound like a fun character concept, I would definitely choose to take the standard array if I rolled stats that badly. Thank you to everyone for watching this class video breakdown. You can look for more D&D 2024 content on the channel, as well as the usual live streams and reviews. You can support my work at patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Dan, Brennan, Xenostar, Collector, Roleplayer, Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Nathan, Cap, Chrisley, Counselor, Andrew, The Road, Stephanie, Jason, Ismail, Amit, Lumpy Spudge, Shiny, Warden, Hell Human, LLC, Tom, AJ, They're Eating the Dogs, Caleb, Chad, Luca, Nicholas, and Marcus, and Gulp patrons, RPG, Papercraft, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Deliza Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Vasicatoris, Scott, Reffus, Jerry, Glenn, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.